We never touched a white man before. The three imposing sisters confessed to the young farmer as they stood at his barn door, rain beginning to fall on the Kansas plains. The townsfolk saw them as burdens, too large, too black, too bold for civilized society. Everyone expected the wandering seamstresses to drift away like tumbleweeds, forgotten and starving. The isolated farmer faced his own curse, losing his family's land to foreclosure, dismissed as another Wells boy destined to fail. But when storm clouds gathered and desperation met kindness, their worlds collided in ways that would either lift them from poverty and prejudice or make them bigger targets for a hostile community. What neither the sisters nor the farmer realized was that their forbidden partnership held the key to transforming not just their own fates, but the heart of an entire territory. Would their courage to cross society's most dangerous boundaries save them all, or destroy everything they'd ever hoped to build? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Millbrook's main street as Ruby Jackson straightened her shoulders and approached the first shop. Her sisters Pearl and Opal flanked her, their worn traveling dresses clean but telling the story of weeks on dusty roads. The seamstress shop's bell chimed as they entered. Mrs. Holloway looked up from her sewing machine. Her eyes swept over the three large black women with barely concealed disgust. "We don't have any work for your kind here." Ruby's voice remained steady. "We're skilled seamstresses, ma'am. We can show you our work." "I said no." Mrs. Holloway's tone grew sharper. "Try the colored section of town. Oh wait, we don't have one." The sisters exchanged glances but said nothing. They filed out as other customers whispered behind cupped hands. The general store proved no better. The clerk took one look at them and shook his head before they could speak. "Whatever you're selling, we're not buying." "We're looking for honest work," Pearl said quietly. "Honest work." The clerk laughed. "For women your size? Try the cattle ranch. They might need help moving heavy things." Opal's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin up. The youngest sister still believed people could surprise you with kindness. Each rejection chipped at that faith. By noon, they had visited every business in town. The pattern never changed. Store owners saw their size and skin color and made instant judgments. Some were polite in their refusal, others were not. Ruby gathered her sisters near the town well. "We'll try the next town over." "With what money?" Pearl asked. Their small savings had dwindled to nearly nothing. "We'll find a way." Ruby's determination never wavered, but privately she wondered how much longer they could keep moving. 3 blocks away, Ezra Wells faced his own humiliation inside Millbrook First National Bank. The banker's office smelled of leather and disappointment. "Your payment is 2 months behind, son." Mr. Harrison tapped his ledger with a thick finger. "Your father couldn't make this land profitable. Your mother tried after he died. Now you're following the same path to failure." Ezra's jaw tightened. "I just need more time. The crops are coming in better this season. Better than terrible is still not good enough." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Face facts, boy. The Wells family is cursed when it comes to farming. Cut your losses and move on. That land has been in my family for 15 years, and it's bankrupted 3 generations of Wells men. Don't make it 4. Ezra left the bank with his foreclosure notice and a hollow feeling in his chest. Outside, townspeople gathered near the well, their voices carrying across the street. "Did you see the size of them? Bold as brass, walking into decent establishments. Someone should tell them to move along before they cause real trouble." Ezra followed their stares to 3 women standing by the well. Even from a distance, he could see the weight of rejection in their posture. The way they held themselves reminded him of something familiar, the same defensive stance he wore when entering the bank or general store, when facing people who had already decided his worth. The oldest woman said something to her sisters. They nodded and began walking toward the edge of town. Their movements were dignified despite the whispers that followed. Ezra made a decision that surprised him. He crossed the street and caught up with them near the livery stable. "Excuse me." The 3 women turned. Up close, Ezra could see intelligence in their eyes, along with wariness. The leader stepped slightly forward, positioning herself between him and her sisters. Yes? Her voice carried caution earned through experience. I heard you were looking for work. We were. Ruby studied his face for signs of mockery or worse intentions. Nobody in this town seems interested. I might have something. Ezra glanced at the darkening sky. Storm's coming in fast. You have somewhere to stay tonight? The sisters exchanged looks. Pearl shook her head slightly. There's a barn on my place. Clean straw, keeps the rain out. Ezra kept his voice matter-of-fact. No charge. We can talk about work in the morning if you're interested. Ruby's eyes narrowed. What kind of work? Sewing mostly. Mending things. I'm not much good with needle and thread. Opal stepped forward. Why would you help us? Nobody else in this town would. Ezra looked back toward Main Street where people still clustered in small groups, pointing and whispering. Maybe I know what it feels like when everyone expects you to fail. Thunder rumbled overhead. The first fat raindrops began to fall. Ruby made her decision. We've never trusted a white man before. I understand. Ezra started walking toward his wagon. But sometimes you have to trust someone, or the storm gets you either way. The sisters followed him to the wagon. As they climbed up, Pearl caught Ruby's arm. Are we making a mistake? Ruby looked at the young farmer's face, searching for deception or hidden motives. She found only loneliness that matched their own, and determination that refused to quit despite setbacks. Maybe, Ruby settled onto the wagon seat, but staying in town tonight would definitely be one. As they drove toward Ezra's farm, none of them knew they were heading toward a partnership that would challenge everything their worlds believed about what was possible, when outcasts refused to accept the fate others had written for them. Morning light filtered through the barn's weathered boards as the Jackson sisters woke to the sound of Ezra chopping wood outside. They had slept better than they had in weeks, despite the simple accommodations. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and cool. Ruby found Ezra splitting logs behind the small farmhouse. His shirt hung in tatters, torn from catching on fence wire the day before. The fabric gaped at the shoulder and sleeve, making him look even younger than his 22 years. Thank you for the shelter, Ruby said. We'll be moving on after breakfast. Ezra paused mid-swing. You don't have to rush off. We don't want to cause you trouble with your neighbors. My neighbors already think I'm trouble. Ezra set down the axe. One more day won't change their minds. Pearl emerged from the barn carrying her sewing basket. She had been studying Ezra's torn shirt with the practiced eye of someone who saw possibilities where others saw problems. That shirt is beyond saving, she said. Ezra glanced down at the damage. I've got others. Not many by the look of your laundry line. Pearl's tone was matter-of-fact, not judgmental. We could mend what you have. Payment for the night's stay. Before Ezra could protest, Opal appeared with his other work shirts draped over her arm. Each one showed signs of hard use and rough repairs. The stitching was functional but crude, the work of someone who understood necessity better than craft. Your mother taught you to sew? Pearl asked. Some. She died when I was 16. Ezra's voice carried old grief. Haven't had much practice since. Pearl spread the least damaged shirt across a tree stump and began examining the tiers. She was a quilter. I can tell from the way she reinforced these seams. Ezra looked surprised. How did you know? Quilters think about how fabric moves. These repairs follow the grain instead of fighting it. Pearl selected thread from her basket. She had good instincts. As Pearl worked, Ezra found himself drawn to watch her hands. The way she approached each tier was methodical but intuitive. She seemed to understand something about the fabric that he couldn't quite grasp. The blue thread, Ezra said suddenly. Pearl paused. What about it? It's wrong for that tier. Too bright. Ezra frowned, unsure why he had spoken. The brown thread. It would look better. Pearl examined both options. The blue matched the shirt perfectly. The brown seemed too dark, but something in Ezra's certainty made her hesitate. Show me, she said. Ezra approached the stump. His fingers hovered over the fabric without quite touching it. There. where the tear follows that worn spot. The brown thread would disappear into the pattern instead of standing out. Pearl switched threads and began stitching. Within minutes, she could see what Ezra had somehow known. The brown thread didn't just blend, it enhanced the shirt's natural texture. The repair became nearly invisible while actually strengthening the fabric. "How did you see that?" Pearl asked. Ezra's face reddened. "I don't see colors the way most people do. Sometimes that makes things clearer." Ruby had been listening from nearby. "What do you mean?" "Colors get mixed up for me. Blue looks like gray sometimes. Red and green are hard to tell apart." Ezra's voice carried embarrassment. "Makes farming difficult when you can't tell ripe from unripe." Pearl held up another damaged shirt. This one had multiple tears across the chest and arms. "What do you see here?" Ezra studied the garment with growing interest. "The tears aren't random. They follow the stress points where the fabric was already weak. If you reinforced along these lines instead of just patching the holes, the shirt would last twice as long." He traced patterns across the fabric with his finger. To Pearl's trained eye, his instincts were remarkable. He saw structure where she saw surface, understood how pieces would move together before they were even cut. "You have an eye," Pearl said quietly. "For what? Design? Pattern? The way things fit together." She pulled out a piece of dress fabric from her supplies. "What would you do with this?" The fabric was plain brown wool, serviceable but unremarkable. Ezra examined it with the same intensity he had shown the shirts. His hands moved across the surface, feeling texture and weight. "It's too stiff for the usual cut, but if you bias the grain here and gather it there, it would drape differently." "Better." He looked up at Pearl. "Why are you asking me this?" Pearl's mind was racing. In New Orleans, she had worked briefly for a French seamstress who understood that great design came from seeing beyond conventional patterns. This young farmer had that same intuitive grasp of how fabric wanted to behave. "Because you see things we miss," Pearl said. Ruby had moved closer during the conversation. "What are you thinking, sister?" "I'm thinking we might have found something more valuable than work." Pearl looked between Ezra and the fabric samples scattered around them. "We might have found a partner." Ezra blinked in confusion. "A partner in what?" "A dress business." The words came out of Pearl's mouth before she had fully formed the thought. But once spoken, the idea crystallized with startling clarity. "We know how to sew," Ruby said, understanding dawning in her voice. "But you know how things should look." Opal had been quiet during the exchange, but now she stepped forward with excitement. "We could make dresses that actually fit real women, not just the tiny ones in fashion magazines." Ezra stared at the three sisters. "You want to start a business? Here?" "Why not?" Pearl's confidence grew as she spoke. "Every woman needs clothes. Most seamstresses only know one way to cut a pattern, but you see dozens of ways. I don't know anything about business." "We do," Ruby said firmly. "We've been managing our own money and travel for 2 years. We know what things cost and what people will pay." The four of them stood in the morning sunlight, surrounded by torn shirts and fabric scraps. None of them had much money or many prospects, but something electric had sparked between them, a recognition of complementary talents that could become something larger than their individual abilities. "One dress," Pearl said finally. "Let us make one dress using your eye for pattern and our skills with needle and thread. If it works, we talk about partnership. If it doesn't, we part as friends." Ezra looked at his farm, at the foreclosure notice tucked in his pocket, at 3 women who saw possibility where everyone else saw problems. "One dress," he agreed. Their test dress took shape over 3 days of careful collaboration. Pearl's skilled hands brought Ezra's vision to life, while Ruby calculated costs and Opal prepared meals that kept them working late into each evening. The result exceeded all their expectations. The brown wool had transformed under Ezra's guidance into something elegant and practical. The unconventional cut flattered fuller figures while remaining comfortable for daily wear. Pearl's precise stitching made every seam strong enough for hard use, yet refined enough for Sunday church. We need to show someone, Ruby said, examining their finished work. Ezra knew exactly who might appreciate what they had created. Mrs. Henderson at the Miller Ranch. She complained to my mother once about never finding dresses that fit properly. The ride to the Miller Ranch took an hour through rolling grassland. Mrs. Henderson emerged from her kitchen when their wagon pulled up, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. She was a large woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Ezra Wells, her voice carried genuine warmth. I haven't seen you since your mother's funeral. How are you managing? Getting by, ma'am. I'd like you to meet the Jackson sisters. They're seamstresses. Mrs. Henderson studied the three women with polite curiosity. Welcome to our ranch. Are you passing through? Ruby stepped forward with the dress draped over her arm. We're hoping to start a business in the area. We wondered if you might look at our work. I don't need much in the way of fancy dresses. This isn't fancy, Pearl said. It's practical clothing that fits real women properly. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose with interest. She had struggled for years to find ready-made clothing that accommodated her full figure. Most dresses required extensive alterations that never quite worked. May I see it? Pearl held up the dress, explaining how the innovative cut provided comfort without sacrificing style. Mrs. Henderson examined the construction with the practiced eye of someone who had sewn her own clothes for decades. The stitching is exceptional, and this design would actually be comfortable for ranch work. She looked up at Pearl with growing excitement. Could you make something similar in blue? We could make it in any color you prefer, Ruby said, with small modifications for your specific measurements. How much would something like this cost? Ruby quoted a price that was fair but confident. Mrs. Henderson agreed without hesitation. When could you have it finished? 2 weeks, Pearl said. Make it 3 weeks and make me 2 dresses. I want to show one to my sister-in-law. She's been complaining about the same fitting problems for years. As they drove back to Ezra's farm, the significance of their success settled over the group. They had found their first real customer, someone who valued their work enough to pay good money for it. We need a proper workspace, Ruby said practically. Ezra's farmhouse kitchen became their temporary sewing room. They rearranged furniture to accommodate cutting tables and storage for fabric and supplies. Opal claimed a corner for her cooking equipment, insisting that good meals were essential for good work. The transformation happened gradually but steadily. What had been a lonely bachelor's residence became a bustling center of creative activity. Each morning brought new challenges as they refined their techniques and developed efficient workflows. Ezra's role evolved beyond pattern design. His eye for color and texture made him invaluable when selecting fabrics and trims. He could predict how different materials would behave when sewn together, preventing costly mistakes before they happened. Pearl's skills expanded as she incorporated Ezra's insights into increasingly sophisticated designs. She began experimenting with techniques that maximized comfort while maintaining elegance, creating garments that worked for women who actually lived and worked instead of posing for portraits. Ruby handled all business aspects with mathematical precision. She tracked expenses, negotiated with suppliers, and maintained detailed records of customer preferences. Her natural leadership kept everyone focused and productive. Opal's contributions went beyond cooking. Her knowledge of herbs helped them develop natural dyes and fabric treatments. She also proved invaluable at understanding what customers really wanted, translating their wishes into practical specifications. Mrs. Henderson's dresses were finished ahead of schedule. When she picked them up, she brought her sister-in-law and 2 neighbors who had heard about the exceptional seamstresses working from the Wells farm. Word spread through the ranch community with surprising speed. Women who had resigned themselves to ill-fitting clothing discovered that properly designed garments could make them feel confident and comfortable simultaneously. The orders began arriving faster than they could fill them. Ruby instituted a waiting list and raised their prices slightly. Demand only increased. Ezra's farm was saved when Ruby made the first payment to the bank, 2 weeks before the foreclosure deadline. Mr. Harrison looked genuinely shocked when Ezra walked into his office with cash in hand. Where did you get this money, son? Business partnership, dressmaking. Harrison's expression shifted to confusion. You're making dresses? I'm designing them. The Jackson sisters are making them. The 3 colored women who came through town last month. The 3 skilled businesswomen who are helping me save this farm. Harrison counted the money twice, clearly struggling to process this unexpected development. The Wells boy was not supposed to succeed. Certainly not in partnership with women the town had dismissed as undesirable. But the payment was real, and the bank had legal obligations regardless of Harrison's personal opinions. This covers what you owe through next month, Harrison admitted reluctantly. It covers what I owe through the end of the year, Ezra corrected, with interest. As Ezra left the bank, he could feel Harrison's stare following him down the street. Other townspeople had begun to notice changes at the Wells farm, too. The increased wagon traffic, the obvious signs of prosperity, the transformation of a failing property into something successful. Some residents viewed these developments with curiosity. Others watched with growing concern as their assumptions about both Ezra and the Jackson sisters proved increasingly wrong. Mrs. Holloway stood at her shop window, observing the steady stream of customers heading toward the Wells farm instead of her establishment. Her jaw tightened with each passing wagon. Change was coming to Millbrook whether people welcomed it or not. The only question was how much resistance they would encounter along the way. The elegant carriage appeared on Ezra's property 3 weeks after their business had begun gaining attention throughout the county. Mrs. Bray Catherine Sterling stepped down with the bearing of someone accustomed to respect and deference. Her traveling dress was expertly tailored, her jewelry understated but expensive. Ruby met her at the farmhouse door, uncertain what to expect from such an obviously wealthy visitor. "I'm looking for the seamstresses everyone is talking about," Mrs. Sterling said. Her voice carried authority without condescension. "You've found us, ma'am." Mrs. Sterling examined the makeshift workshop with keen interest. Bolts of fabric lined makeshift shelves. 3 sewing stations occupied the main room. The organized efficiency impressed her more than fancy equipment might have. "I need a gown for the governor's reception next month. Something exceptional." Mrs. Sterling's gaze settled on Pearl, who was pinning a complex pattern. "I've heard you create designs that other seamstresses cannot match." Pearl looked up from her work. "We specialize in flattering cuts for real women, ma'am." "Good. I have no interest in fashion that only works on 17-year-old girls." Mrs. Sterling smiled slightly. "What would you suggest for a woman of my age and figure?" Ezra emerged from the storage room carrying bolts of silk that had arrived that morning. Mrs. Sterling watched with curiosity as he spread the fabrics across the cutting table, running his hands over the material with obvious expertise. "The deep green," Ezra said without preamble, "with the gold silk for contrast trim. The weight will drape properly for formal wear, but the color will complement your complexion." Mrs. Sterling raised an eyebrow. "You're the pattern designer I've heard about." "I am. Interesting. Show me what you see." Ezra arranged the fabrics with quick, confident movements. He explained how the green silk's weight would create elegant lines, while the gold accents would draw attention to Mrs. Sterling's best features. His vision was detailed and sophisticated. "How long would such a gown take?" Mrs. Sterling asked. 3 weeks, Ruby said. "Our current waiting list runs that long." "I need it in 10 days. Ruby hesitated. "That would require additional charges for priority work." "Money is not a concern." Mrs. Sterling reached into her reticule and withdrew a leather purse. "Half payment now, half on delivery." The amount she offered was 3 times their usual fee. Ruby accepted without negotiation, sensing this commission represented more than just another dress order. After Mrs. Sterling departed, the 4 partners looked at each other with mixed excitement and apprehension. 10 days, Pearl said. "We'll have to work around the clock." "We can do it," Opal said with characteristic optimism. What none of them anticipated was the sudden escalation of hostility from certain townspeople. Mrs. Holloway had been spreading increasingly vicious rumors about the improper nature of their business arrangement. Her campaign gained momentum when word spread about their wealthy new customer. The first sign of serious trouble came on the 3rd day of working on Mrs. Sterling's gown. Ezra returned from town with supplies to find Pearl in tears and Ruby furious. What happened? Some town women paid us a visit, Ruby said through gritted teeth. Made it clear we weren't welcome here. Pearl wiped her eyes but continued sewing. They said we were corrupting you, taking advantage of your kindness. They said worse things than that, Opal added quietly. Ezra felt anger burning in his chest. What exactly did they say? Ruby met his eyes. Nothing you need to repeat. We've heard it all before. But the harassment continued. Suppliers began refusing to deliver materials to the farm. The postmaster delayed their mail. Small acts of sabotage appeared regularly. Fence posts loosened, tools went missing. Their vegetable garden was trampled. The pressure took its toll. Opal developed headaches that kept her awake at night. Pearl's usually steady hands began to shake during delicate work. Ruby grew increasingly protective, rarely leaving her sisters alone on the property. Ezra faced his own challenges in town. Former acquaintances turned away when he approached. Shopkeepers served him grudgingly. Children threw stones at his wagon and ran away laughing. Maybe we should leave, Opal said one evening as they worked by lamplight on Mrs. Sterling's gown. Find somewhere more accepting. We're not leaving, Ruby said firmly. We've built something here. We're not letting ignorant people destroy it. But at what cost? Pearl asked. If this continues, someone could get hurt. Ezra looked up from the golden trim he was arranging. My mother used to say that some things are worth fighting for. This is one of them. The gown was nearly finished when disaster struck. Ezra woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of crackling flames. The workshop corner of the farmhouse was ablaze, fed by fabric and wooden fixtures. The four of them formed a bucket brigade from the well, fighting desperately to save their work and tools. Neighbors who had shunned them for weeks appeared with more buckets and blankets. When faced with actual danger, basic human decency overrode social prejudice. They managed to contain the fire before it consumed the entire building, but the damage was severe. Half their equipment was destroyed. Bolts of fabric were ruined by smoke and water. 3 weeks of work disappeared in 30 minutes. Mrs. Sterling's nearly completed gown had survived, protected by the wooden chest where they stored finished pieces. But their ability to complete it on time seemed impossible with their remaining resources. How could this have happened? Opal asked as they surveyed the wreckage in the morning light. Ezra found the answer near the damaged wall. A kerosene-soaked rag that had clearly been thrown through the window. The fire had been deliberately set. Someone wanted to stop us from finishing that dress, he said. Ruby examined the evidence with grim understanding. Someone who thinks destroying our work will force us to leave. Pearl sat among the ruins of her sewing station, holding a partially melted thimble that had belonged to her grandmother. For the first time since they had arrived in Kansas, she looked defeated. Maybe they're right, she said quietly. Maybe we should give up. No. The voice came from the doorway. Mrs. Henderson stood there with 2 other ranch women, all carrying baskets of supplies. We brought fabric, thread, needles, everything we could gather. Mrs. Henderson set her basket down firmly. You're not giving up because some coward struck in the night. Other customers began arriving throughout the morning. Women who had found confidence in properly fitted dresses were not willing to lose the seamstresses who had given them that gift. By afternoon, a new workshop had taken shape in Ezra's barn. Borrowed equipment filled makeshift stations. Donated materials replaced what had been destroyed. The community that valued their work proved stronger than the forces trying to eliminate it. But questions remained. Who had set the fire? Would they try again? And could Mrs. Sterling's gown be finished in time despite the setback? The answers would determine not just their business future, but whether justice or hatred would prevail in Millbrook. Working in the barn by candlelight, the 4 partners completed Mrs. Sterling's gown with hours to spare. The fire had forced them to innovate with limited materials, creating techniques that actually enhanced the dress beyond their original design. Pearl's hands had found their steadiness again. Ruby's calculations proved perfect. Opal's herbal treatments had restored the silk's luster after smoke damage. Ezra's pattern vision had guided them through each challenge, turning constraints into creative solutions. Mrs. Sterling arrived precisely at the appointed time. She examined the completed gown with the eye of someone who understood both quality and craftsmanship. The deep green silk fell in elegant lines, while gold trim caught the light with subtle sophistication. Exceptional work, especially given your recent difficulties. Mrs. Sterling's tone carried more knowledge than a casual observer should possess. Ruby accepted the final payment with careful politeness. "Thank you, ma'am. We hope the gown serves you well." "I'm certain it will." Mrs. Sterling paused, studying each of their faces with unusual intensity. "I wonder if we might speak privately about your business." They gathered in the barn's makeshift office area, surrounded by the tools and materials their customers had donated after the fire. Mrs. Sterling settled into a chair with the bearing of someone preparing to reveal important information. "I haven't been entirely honest about my identity." Her voice carried new authority. "My name is Catherine Sterling, but I'm not just the widow of a successful rancher." The partners exchanged glances. They had suspected their wealthy customer held more influence than she initially revealed. "My late husband was born into slavery in Georgia. After emancipation, he came west with nothing but determination and intelligence. By the time he died, he owned 3 cattle ranches and had invested in dozens of frontier businesses." Mrs. Sterling's eyes held pride and grief in equal measure. "I inherited not just his wealth, but his mission to create opportunities for people society overlooks." Ezra felt his understanding shift. "You've been evaluating us." "From the moment I heard about your partnership. A young white farmer working with 3 black seamstresses, creating something innovative despite social pressure." Mrs. Sterling nodded approvingly. "I needed to see how you handled success, adversity, and the kind of hatred that destroyed your workshop." Pearl leaned forward with growing excitement. "This was all a test. The dress commission was real. My need for exceptional clothing is genuine. But yes, I was also assessing your character, skills, and resilience." Mrs. Sterling reached into her reticule and withdrew an official-looking document. "You passed every measure I applied." Ruby examined the papers Mrs. Sterling handed her. Legal contracts, financial agreements, business incorporation documents. The terms were generous beyond anything they had imagined possible. "I want to invest in your business, provide capital for expansion, legal protection, and access to markets throughout the Western Territories." Mrs. Sterling's offer was comprehensive and detailed. "I've identified 12 towns that need exactly what you provide. Quality clothing for real women, designed with innovation and made with skill." Opal's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. After weeks of uncertainty and harassment, someone was offering them security and growth. "What would you require from us?" Ruby asked, her business instincts engaging despite her excitement. "Continued excellence, expansion into new markets, and the courage to keep challenging assumptions about what's possible when people work together across social boundaries." Before anyone could respond, commotion erupted outside the barn, voices raised in anger, the sound of multiple horses, boots on gravel. The partners moved to the window and saw Mrs. Holloway approaching with several townspeople, their faces set with determination. "We know you're in there," Mrs. Holloway called out. "It's time this unnatural arrangement ended." Mrs. Sterling rose from her chair with calm authority. "I believe it's time I had a conversation with your neighbors." She walked outside with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. The group of townspeople faltered slightly when confronted by her obvious wealth and confidence. "Mrs. Holloway, I presume." Mrs. Sterling's voice carried across the farmyard. "I've heard about your concerns regarding this business. These people don't belong here. Their arrangement goes against natural order." Mrs. Holloway's conviction wavered under Mrs. Sterling's steady gaze. "Natural order." Mrs. Sterling repeated the phrase thoughtfully. "You mean the order where talented people are dismissed because of their appearance? Where innovation is destroyed by fear? Where communities reject prosperity because it comes from unexpected sources?" She gestured toward the barn where the partners waited. "These individuals have created something valuable. They employ local people, contribute to the economy, and provide services this community clearly needs. What exactly threatens you about their success? Mrs. Holloway's face reddened. It's not proper. A white man working so closely with colored women. People are talking. People are always talking. The question is whether they're saying anything worth hearing. Mrs. Sterling's tone grew colder. I suspect your real concern is that their business succeeds where yours struggles. Several townspeople began shifting uncomfortably. When stripped of righteous rhetoric, Mrs. Holloway's motivations appeared petty and jealous. Furthermore, Mrs. Sterling continued, I have reason to believe someone in this group was responsible for the recent fire that destroyed their workshop. The accusation hung in the evening air like a challenge. Mrs. Holloway's face went pale. I have no proof of arson, Mrs. Sterling said carefully. But I have excellent relationships with territorial law enforcement. Continued harassment of my business partners would be investigated thoroughly. The threat was polite, but unmistakable. Mrs. Holloway gathered her supporters and retreated without further argument. As the hostile crowd dispersed, Mrs. Sterling turned back to the barn where the four partners waited. Still interested in my investment offer? She asked with a slight smile. Ruby stepped forward with growing confidence. Yes, ma'am, we are. The partnership that had begun with desperate necessity was about to become something none of them had dared imagine. Success, security, and the chance to change how their world thought about what was possible when people chose cooperation over prejudice. But first, they had Mrs. Sterling's gown to deliver to the governor's reception, where it would make its own statement about the power of innovation and excellence over social convention. The governor's reception took place in the territorial capital's grandest hotel. Mrs. Sterling's entrance in the green silk gown created the sensation they had hoped for. The dress moved with elegant grace, its innovative cut flattering her figure while the gold trim caught gaslight with sophisticated shimmer. Within an hour, 3 women had approached her, requesting the name of her seamstress. Word traveled quickly through social circles. By the following week, orders began arriving by mail from across the territory. Wealthy ranchers' wives, merchants' daughters, and politicians' spouses all wanted dresses from the innovative designers who had created Mrs. Sterling's remarkable gown. The barn workshop expanded again. Mrs. Sterling's investment allowed them to purchase proper equipment and hire 2 local women who had been struggling to support their families. Sarah Mitchell, a widow with 3 children, proved exceptionally skilled at detailed beadwork. Maria Santos, whose husband had been injured in a mining accident, brought expertise in leatherwork that enhanced their designs. Ruby managed the growing operation with mathematical precision. She instituted systematic record-keeping, standardized pricing, and efficient production schedules. Her natural leadership transformed individual skills into coordinated enterprise. Pearl's role evolved into head designer, working closely with Ezra to create patterns that challenged conventional fashion while remaining practical for frontier life. Together they developed techniques that could accommodate any body type, making beauty accessible to women previously ignored by mainstream fashion. Opal expanded her contributions beyond cooking and healing. Her natural empathy made her invaluable at understanding what customers truly wanted. She could translate vague requests into specific design requirements, ensuring satisfaction for women who had never owned properly fitted clothing. Ezra's unique vision became the foundation of their reputation. His pattern innovations, born from seeing fabric differently than others, created designs that transformed how women moved and felt in their clothes. He developed training materials that allowed them to teach their techniques to seamstresses in other locations. The success brought challenges along with opportunities. Mrs. Holloway filed a complaint with territorial authorities, claiming unfair business practices and improper conduct. The investigation revealed her own history of overcharging customers and using inferior materials. Her reputation never recovered from the scrutiny she had invited. More serious opposition came from established fashion houses in eastern cities who resented competition from frontier upstarts. They attempted to restrict fabric supplies and spread rumors about quality. Mrs. Sterling's connections and influence neutralized most of these efforts, while the superior craftsmanship of Wells and Sisters designs spoke for itself. The partnership between Ruby and Ezra deepened into something more profound than business collaboration. Their mutual respect grew into genuine affection. Carefully expressed within the social constraints of their time and place, they found ways to honor their feelings while maintaining the professional relationship that protected all four partners. Their first anniversary as business partners was marked by opening shops in 3 additional territories. Each location employed local seamstresses trained in their innovative techniques. The expansion created opportunities for dozens of women while spreading their philosophy of inclusive design. Mrs. Sterling's investment proved remarkably prescient. Wells and Sisters Designs became the largest specialty clothing manufacturer in the Western Territories within 18 months. Their success demonstrated the power of combining different perspectives and skills in pursuit of excellence. The social impact extended beyond commerce. Towns that initially resisted their presence began competing to attract Wells and Sisters shops. The economic benefits of their operations, combined with the obvious satisfaction of their customers, gradually changed attitudes about unconventional partnerships. Young women began apprenticing with their local shops, learning skills that provided independence and economic security. The training programs they developed became models for other businesses seeking to employ women in meaningful work. Ruby and Ezra's relationship eventually became an open courtship, blessed by her sisters and accepted by a community that had learned to value their contributions. Their wedding celebration took place on the farm where they had first discovered their complementary abilities, surrounded by customers, employees, and friends who had benefited from their courage to challenge social expectations. Pearl opened her dream shop in Denver, specializing in formal wear that made every woman feel beautiful regardless of her size or background. Her innovations in flattering design became standard techniques copied by seamstresses throughout the region. Opal remained at the original farm location, managing the headquarters operation while developing her healing garden into a community resource. Her knowledge of herbs and nutrition improved the health of everyone who worked with them, while her optimistic spirit maintained morale during challenging periods. Mrs. Sterling's investment multiplied beyond anyone's projections. More importantly to her, the business fulfilled her late husband's vision of creating opportunities for people society overlooked. She took particular pride in the way their success changed minds and opened doors for others. 5 years after 3 desperate women had knocked on a failing farmer's door, Wells and Sisters Designs employed over 200 people across 12 territories. Their inclusive approach to fashion had become the preferred choice for women who valued both quality and dignity. The original barn workshop was preserved as a monument to what became possible when people chose cooperation over prejudice. Tours were offered to other entrepreneurs seeking to understand how innovation could emerge from the most unlikely partnerships. Ruby often stood in that preserved workshop, remembering the fear and uncertainty they had felt during those first days. The transformation seemed impossible in retrospect, yet each step had followed logically from the decision to trust across racial and social boundaries. Her hand rested over her heart as she watched Ezra teaching young apprentices his pattern techniques. The courage to touch one person's life had indeed changed everything, creating ripples of positive change that continued expanding throughout their community and beyond. What had begun as desperate necessity had become a legacy of dignity, excellence, and proof that America's frontier offered space for dreams that conventional society deemed impossible.